everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC, a proud member of the Beautiful Game Network, and brought to you by Roughneck Scarves and Icarus FC. I am your host, Phil Bakke, and I am back once again with my co-host, Mikka Burrell. Mikka, how's it going? I feel like we're finally coming up for air after what was an insane result on last Friday.
Yeah, when I put the tweet out for listener questions, I was like, wait, we haven't tweeted in 4 days? Like, we're obviously still in shock by what transpired on Friday night, as it were. Yeah, madness. But, you know, we couldn't let the week go by without giving y'all something about that result. But crazy. And then after that, I think my body, like, rejected it, because then I immediately, like, got a summer cold. So if you hear some nasally nonsense from my end, like, I'm just getting over a little bit of a cold, so I apologize in advance to all the listeners.
Hashtag not COVID.
No.
Just to put a disclaimer
Been
on
there,
it.
done that.
Yeah,
Worn the t-shirt.
Right. No, this result, and we'll obviously, like, we'll get on to just the absolute madness that happened in Colorado Springs on Friday, and all of the, like, weirdness surrounding that game. So we'll go nice and in depth there, and then we've got a little bit of a mini mailbag because we had a handful of folks send in listener questions on Twitter and Instagram. So we'll kind of go through some listener questions in the middle, and then we'll look ahead to San Diego Loyal, who we have coming up here at the weekend, Saturday evening at the Swap. So it'll be nice to have Locomotive back home, but. Before we get on to all of that, yeah, like this Colorado Springs game, before I'll do some admin at some point, but this Colorado Springs game literally felt like the opening scene, like, you know, the effect on the opening scene of, like, Saving Private Ryan, where, like, the explosion goes off and it's like the ringing in the ears and, like, the, like, stumbling around, and you're like, well, that guy's arm's off, that guy's like, what the fuck is happening? That's literally, like, after watching this game, you're just, like, staggering around, like, what's happening? Like, I can't see, I can't hear. Like, it was just an insane result. But if you're finding us for the first time, we are Seriously Loco, and we're an El Paso Locomotive podcast that's available on all the major podcast platforms, and we are also able to be followed along on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram. We also have a Patreon, which I think we've got now some impetus for some writing as we've got a new signing finally.
Yes. Training,
which is nice to see. Artem Kolod in training for the team, and so if you're so inclined, you can support us over on Patreon, and thanks to all those who already do. And kits, I know everybody's, like, excited to receive it. I know it feels like a long kind of, like, flash to bang in terms of we've got, you know, we had the order in, and it just takes time for production, so I promise they are on their way, and as soon as we have them in hand, so you guys will start to receive them, and I am so excited to get the kits in and get everybody outfitted in some Seriously Loco gear. It'll just be awesome to see those dotting the swap on match day, and We'll have to bully Duke Keith into wearing one on a broadcast, I think, for because not to out him, but he does have one. So on his way. So, anyways, Mikka. I mean, obviously we are without Christian tonight, so we're gonna forego Christian's question out of pure respect. Unless, are we about to get a phantom drop of a question?
I know. I see him lurking on the outline. Christian, what's good?
He is in the Google Doc, perhaps. If we get a phantom Christian's question, we could take a break to answer. But the Seriously Loco match review. But Mikka, on to Friday night. It was like we said, just an insane result, and obviously there's going to be a lot that we talk about as kind of like the different aspects to this match, because it feels like about 4 different matches all wrapped into one. But as a whole, and looking at this match, Locomotive coming away with a point in a game that they absolutely had no business getting a result out of, but ultimately deserving to win? Question mark.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it ends 4-4, and we started absolutely horrifically, but I think you could argue on the basis of the way that we responded in the second half that we probably should have left with all 3 points. Unfortunately, we have to settle for the draw. On the bright side, I will say that the draw maintains our unbeaten record against Colorado Springs Switchbacks. I mean, we certainly have their number, and I think that they are absolutely sick of seeing us by now. I think that's now, 5 draws, 6 wins. No, for us, and no wins for them all time. So
that is a wild record.
It is. That is absolutely crazy that we are absolutely their bogey team. They just can't seem to get one on us when it certainly looked like they would 3-0 up. But unfortunately it was a collapse for them, I would say. And they managed to salvage it with some questionable officiating, but I'm sure we'll get onto it. But yeah, no, I don't think it's so crazy to say that we maybe on the balance of what happened in the second half deserved to go home with all 3 points, given how quickly and effectively we were able to turn it around from a pretty disastrous first half. But nothing's coming easy to this Locomotive side right now, and we did say, I think I said, and maybe you guys agreed with me, that like a draw was in the offing, and I said 1-1. I did not say 4-4. But I'll just brag and say I was right.
And it's funny, we may as well just start with, as you said, the disastrous start, and there really is no other way of putting it. This was, I put it in the outline, I'll say it out loud, possibly the worst 10 minutes we've seen from Locomotive ever. And that is a bigger statement, I think, than many would imagine, because obviously we're 3-0 down in the first 10 minutes. We have had some shocking passages of play, especially this year, in terms of just these like torrents of goals from opposition. I think the Vegas game particularly comes to mind, like these kind of like wild matches where the team concedes a goal softly, and we can kind of talk about, I guess we could spend all kinds of time talking about each one, but conceding a goal softly, followed by another soft concession, followed by another soft concession. Like just this tendency of this team to really play in accordance with like their confidence, I guess. And maybe that is the story of this game, in that they were feeling extremely down after conceding the soft goal and really rode that wave down. And then the second that they had any sort of confidence back, they wrote it right back up. But that down period was like, I think for many fans and for us watching, like a question mark of like, okay, am I even going to continue watching this game? And is this the end, like, of Locomotive's playoff, chances? The end of, like, there was a lot happening. Say all that just to say, horrible opening 10 minutes, and it felt like we were sucked into this like death spiral almost.
That's interesting, Phil. I hadn't thought about kind of like the ebbs and flows of our own confidence, regardless of what Colorado were or were not doing. But yeah, I think there is something to that, and I think the reason that I don't disagree with it being possibly the worst 10-15 minutes Locomotive have ever produced is because I don't think I've ever seen this litany of like individual errors, one after the other after the other. I mean, Colorado Springs didn't have to do anything exceptional to score those 3 goals. Well, I guess except the second one, because that is an outrageous chip.
Oh yeah,
from Haji Berry, I think it was, but
not the first time that we've seen that finish against an exposed like Evan Newton this year. Not to blame Evan for that goal because it's absolutely not his fault, but
right.
When exposed, like that is the type of goal that we've conceded.
Right, just looping it over him because he's had to rush out. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that there was anything as a team that Colorado Springs did exceptionally. I think I commented on this maybe in our group chat or something, or whoever I was speaking to, but Colorado were very aggressive in the press. The first half, much of the first half, if you will, like if you divide the game into kind of quarters. And my hope was that would not last, and I think we saw that it didn't. But yeah, as for the first 3 goals, I mean, individual errors is really the name of the game here. I mean, the first one is Yuma waiting for the ball to come to him rather than, meeting it. and Haji Berry is just able to latch onto it, sprints clean on through it, and Yuma knows there, it's absolutely pointless to try to go after it because he doesn't even try. And it was one of the rare moments I think lately where we've seen Yuma kind of not have a great game because he's been absolutely solid for the most part, despite maybe his teammates suffering more. So I mean, that's the first one. Then the second one is weird because it did seem like we were trying to, win more of those battles in midfield, and we do win that aerial duel, which Lucho Solignac collects in midfield, which he's in midfield. I mean, that's a whole other talking point, right? Mm-hmm. And then he loses possession, and then, they're able to break again. And then finally the third one with Liam Rose, just a really simple square pass to him from Andrew Fox, who's maybe in a position that he doesn't expect because he's having to deputize at left back, and the touch is just awful, absolutely awful. Yeah. And they're in again, and the finishes were well taken, but just it was a lot of lackadaisical passing and just not focused in the way that we really should be on the road to a good team in crunch time of the season. So I think that was why it was so jarring as a sequence of events, because I don't think we've ever really seen that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. We've got almost 4 seasons to look back on, but I just don't remember that many individual mistakes, like one after the other, from a Locomotive side.
I would have to dig back through the archives, but I'm fairly confident there wasn't a goal that we conceded, or there wasn't a game we conceded 4 goals like prior to this season. So
right, I mean, that in and of itself is rare. Yeah, absolutely.
I think you've hit on something that is exactly what made this opening 10 minutes so intensely bad, which is the fans were expecting a response for sure, because it was 4 games without a goal, 4 losses in a row, and now 8 minutes, essentially 8 minutes or 9 minutes into this one, staring down the barrel of a 5th straight loss. Like, there was just something so shocking about a 4th minute shocking sort of mistake, 6th minute shocking mistake, 9th minute shocking mistake. It was just completely opposite of what fans were expecting, because we knew, like, the team knows, and I'm not saying that any of them went out there trying to, do X, Y, or Z, but the reality is that, like, what fans got in that opening 10 minutes was exactly the opposite of what you'd expect from a team who has playoff aspirations, facing one of the biggest teams in the West, like, on the road. I don't know, like, and again, I use whatever Liverpool analogies because it's what, like, comes easy, but Crystal Palace playing at Anfield, like, if they had come out and dropped a shocker, like, it wouldn't have necessarily been, like, surprising, I guess, and it would have been like, oh, Liverpool's just good. But, like, if you're the team that's further down the table and you're playing against one of the teams, like, up towards the top, especially in a time where they're kind of in a wobble, like, Colorado Springs have not been that good recently, and we came out and just made it so easy for them rather than like really putting the pressure on, because at the end of the day, like, they're at home, like, we kind of have a free hit. No one's going to say going away to Colorado Springs and not getting a result is like a big issue or whatever, but we just made it so easy for them in that opening 10 minutes. And that's what was so, I think that's why like all of these different like shouts got so elevated by this game, where all of a sudden it's like, kiss playoffs goodbye, kiss, because it's like, if they can't get up for this,
yeah,
then like, what the fuck does the rest of the season look like? Because it's like, if we don't come out of the blocks in a game where it's like, you know, they have a good crowd, you know, nice kind of hostile atmosphere, like really trying to like put the pressure on a good team, a team that's like higher up the table in the West, then like, what are we gonna do? So,
right,
we got this wild juxtaposition in this game because, and I will say, and shout out to USL Tactics, John Morrissey, like, pointed out that there are some tweaks made kind of in the first half to stop it from maybe potentially getting worse. And it's essentially Liam Rose, like, rather than being a lone six, Eric Calvillo kind of drops in next to him and they play sort of a double pivot in midfield, like, rather than playing a lone six. And I think herein lies, and I hate to like single out a player, because there were plenty of players, and you know, you mentioned Yuma, and like we mentioned Lucho in midfield, like potentially, you know, being at fault for the second goal. But the Liam Rose issue is like his introduction to the squad and introduction to the starting 11 came at exactly the time that Richie was being sort of, you know, frozen out, whatever. Right. Like, we've been down that road, not to rehash old things, but Liam, the difference between Richie as the lone six and Liam as the lone six is just, at this point, there's too much evidence to say that Liam is not the Richie replacement that we were looking for. Like, if we were looking for someone to take over that lone six role, who quarterbacks the offense and is able to distribute the ball quickly and really like marshal, you know, sort of like, I guess, transition the ball from defense into attack, Liam just isn't that guy. Like, he has, I think he's a quality player. Like, in certain aspects, he has some like good attributes, but when he is alone in that six, he takes too many touches. He's a little bit ponderous, like, in possession, and it slows our possession down, and it makes him the press trigger. Like, teams absolutely say, as soon as that guy gets the ball, that's when we press. And that is like, Richie is the opposite. Like, Richie is the guy that, like, yeah, you are more than welcome to try to press him, and he is either going to retain the ball and turn into space or whatever, or he's going to play a first-time pass that breaks your press. Like, and obviously I'm not saying Richie 100% of the time gets it right, but more often than not, he does. So this whole situation with Liam being brought in and everything, this game to me, like, the evidence is just mounting to the point of, we've either thrown Liam into a situation where he's not going to be successful and it's too soon and he needs to like get used to the game or get used to Hutch's system, or he's just not that guy and we need to like look elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot there. I think there's a lot to unpack. I mean, first of all, it's always going to be difficult when you are trying to fill the boots of Richie Ryan, because number one, I don't think that's possible. I don't think there's one Richie Ryan, right? I mean, that's it. And that's not to say that that Liam Rose can't make that position his own, because there's different kinds of sixes, right? I mean, I think Richie is definitely a regista, right, if you will, like a deep line playmaker, someone who's not the most physical, but, you know, his trick is his mind and his reading of the game and his positioning.
A Pirlo,
right? Absolutely. Yeah. Liam, I think he is definitely more in the modern footballer mold of like more physical, a bit more pace to him, things like that. And clearly, a lot of room to grow. He's what, like 25, like not even in his peak, or, not even close to it.
Yeah.
And so I think that if he's not that guy, it might just be for now, right? The problem being that we don't have time to figure that out if we're intending to be a playoff side this season. So that's kind of what makes it problematic. And John Hutchinson, he said this before in press conferences and the like, is I see what you guys see, like trust me, kind of thing, right? And he hooks Liam at the half.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big statement to the player and to the team of like, I think there is a perception, rightly or wrongly, that this is Hutch's guy, right? I mean, they were literally teammates at one point at Central Coast Mariners. They are compatriots. I'm sure John was a defensive midfielder. I'm sure he sees himself in Liam a little bit and wants to nurture that player. And he's an Aussie, like, all of that. The connections are clear, in other words. And with the fallout of the Richie Ryan situation, like it's hard not to make these like comparisons, right? But then Richie Ryan comes on, and I mean Richie does what Richie does, which is when he's in possession, it's getting to where it needs to go, and when we do lose the ball, when there is a bounce, when it looks like there's going to be a break, he's really good at pinning the other team in and collecting those loose balls, because it doesn't take a whole lot of athleticism on his part. It's just really smart footballing and like just knowing where to be and knowing where the ball's going to bounce. I mean, I think of was it our third goal? I don't know. The one that came, it was kind of like in the second phase of a corner. Richie keeps that play alive, right?
Yep.
And that's what Richie provides to you, that know-how and the game experience, which you only get from playing as long as he has, right? And not, of course, and pairing that with natural talent. So, yeah, I think it was a tough night for Liam. I mean, to be fair, you look at the statistics, and it wasn't like a shocker in that sense, but just the mistake for the third goal that we conceded really overshadowed it a lot. It really showed just like how different I think he is to Richie Ryan, because I think that Richie Ryan, if he collects that ball, it's a first time pass to someone up the field, and we're on our way. And that's going to happen. Mistakes are part of football, but it was a tough night for him, and I think him getting hooked at the half it says a lot, I guess.
Yeah, and Richie comes on, as you said. Richie comes on and has a good performance and really just stabilizes things in midfield there in the second half. But alongside him, they make the switch. Cristiano Francois, who, in fairness, we've talked a lot about Cristiano Francois getting hooked, and like, hey, he's been the impetus. It looks like he's been the outball, all this stuff. Hutch makes the call to bring Francois off and bring Dylan Maris on, changes the shape of midfield. It allows them to move Lucho out of midfield into the forward line, moves Gomez out to the wing, and then and Zacharias is able to like maintain that right wing spot, and the attack just instantly transformed and looked every bit like the functional unit that it was, for much of the beginning of the season. And again, this is absolutely not criticism of Cristiano, but the credit just has to go to Dylan Maris, because Dylan comes on and puts in probably his best. I mean, this was maybe alongside maybe the worst 10 minutes of Locomotive football to open the game. Dylan puts in probably his best 45 minutes in a Locomotive shirt, which is absolutely saying something. Like, this performance that Dylan turns in is off the charts. He got an 8.5 on FOTMob. It could have been an 85, like, in my opinion.
Yeah, Dylan Maris was absolutely incredible. Of course, he gets the brace. But just the goals are kind of secondary for me. It's the intent with which he came on and really like grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck. I mean, you hear that cliche repeated often in football, but he really did. I mean, everything was flowing through him. He was very businesslike, even when he scored that absolute worldie to get us at least on the score sheet. very casual, walking back to the center circle, like, let's go again and again and again. Dylan was absolutely incredible. And to be fair to Dylan, even in this Barron run, he's been very good. And I think we've highlighted that of, like, you know, even though we're not doing that well, he went the full 90 in Monterey and with Louisville, San Antonio, I think, as well, and was decent in all those games, even when we weren't getting the results. Was also very good against Colorado when we won back in early July, if you can believe it. So Dylan's been consistent, and I wonder if he didn't take kindly to be, like, starting on the bench. Not that I necessarily blame John Hutchinson for trying to switch it up, because I think we have been calling for that a little bit, to be fair. And boy, did he. The starting 11 was something else. But, I mean, if you can bring on a player of Dylan Mars' quality off the bench, like, this is why our expectations are as high as they are, because we do have these players that can make a difference, and they need to be all playing more than the sum of their parts. And, yeah, just amazing goal from Dylan. Both goals, really. And I'm just absolutely shocked that he doesn't get into the team of the week, but Zacharias and Lucho Solignac do, who they also had blinders, but it's like, yeah,
both deservedly, but Dylan is absolutely the snub.
For sure.
Two goals, like, and I think he has the pre-assist, like, on the fourth as well. So
92% accurate passes. I mean, accurate crosses, long balls, all 100%. Just outrageous. Like, he was really, really good. Even won an aerial duel. Like, he was doing it all.
Sir, who are you? Yeah, the goal itself, I mean, Dylan had been on the pitch for about 7 minutes, and it looked like, I mean, I jokingly tweeted that I was like, Locomotive have looked decent after going 3-0 down, to be fair.
And you were slandered.
I was. People are like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "This is a joke." But
unless.
and so yeah, the goal itself, Dylan. We know the class that Dylan has from distance, and he scored a handful of great goals in his time. There's something about this strike with the left, just like the way he cuts across it, and it just bends into that, that like outward bend into the far corner, or like inside the near post, I should say. The way that he cuts across that and the way it evades the keeper is just, there was something so satisfying. And at the time, we're all thinking, nice way to end the Barron run in this, what will inevitably be a 4-1 loss with a footnote of a Dylan Maris like banger of a goal, or a 3-1 loss with a Dylan Maris banger. Right,
yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you had a peep at the XG, but it was actually really interesting. So, going by Y Scout, and I tend to trust them.
Yeah.
Switchbacks had 1.18 XG to our 1.7. So, I mean, XG is not everything, but I think what it can tell you is that, like, a lot of these goals were just outrageous. Like, not really had any business scoring them on a regular basis. But, I mean, I think we've said this throughout the season, that this Locomotive team is nothing if not entertaining. So
the realization that we kind of quickly came to, I think, in this one is, like, the Dylan goal goes in, and then it's like, is this going to be a consolation, or has something genuinely changed? Because in theory, we've got enough time. And it was really the second goal for me that showed, like, oh no, like, this game has actually turned, and, like, there is something in this. Like, I think it's the second where I'm like, oh wow, like, we're kind of cutting through them. And Josue Aron Gomez, who we know is so good coming off of the left-hand side, it was one of his kind of trademark runs where it's not anything flashy, it's not anything crazy, but he kind of just wills his way past the defender and ends up on the ball just through sheer persistence and squares it to Lucho for the easiest tap-in that he'll score.
Yeah, absolutely. Is this the one that is the kind of the second, third phase-ish of the corner?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the one where this could easily just go back up the other way if Richie Ryan's not there to keep it in. They're attacking, have to keep the pressure on. But yeah, I love that from Gomez. This this is where he gets to use kind of like his low center of gravity and his really good balance and just, like you said, muscle his way past the defender, and the ball follows him. I mean, I think the bounce it's lucky, but he is doing the work to keep going, and yeah, squares it to Lucho, and it's just, I mean, these are the finishes that we've been wanting from Lucho, like just the, stay in or around the 6-yard area and wait for these opportunities. And I, credit to the coaching staff too for making that adjustment and pushing Lucho forward more instead of, as one of the 3 ostensibly in midfield where he could actually, feast in the box. So yeah, easy tap in, like you said.
The thing that maybe we weren't expecting, and you mentioned the Lucho start in midfield, because we certainly weren't expecting Lucho as part of the midfield 3, although injuries in midfield I think have like somewhat forced the hand, and Azcona like dropped a little bit of a not so great game there last time, so I think they were looking for other solutions. Lucho also is not it. Like, I'd rather they just call a spade and play with the 2 in midfield, but that's just me. The third goal was not the first one that Ricardo Zacarias was involved in, and really the first goal is where it starts to show like, oh, Ricky is like up for this, and is really like getting involved, getting in and around the box. And he plays like it's just on the first goal, he played like kind of a ball into, tried to play it into the feet of, I think, Gomez, who was making a run in field, and it kind of bounces around before it finds Lucho, who lays it off to Dylan to drill home. But the second, or I should say the last 2 goals for Locomotive, Zacarias is like at the heart of, and the third, Dylan's second, is some like Ricardo Zacarias found, I think you called it on Twitter, like he turned into Mbappe for like 20 minutes, where he's doing little like chop backs and like all kinds of like the like other things, and just absolutely skins a defender before squaring to Dylan for the equalizer.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I joked about the Mbappe thing because it was just like pure pace and like just like really the runs weren't even clever. They were just like straight like track meet runs, right? And then with the skill at the end, like you said, he did like a Ronaldo chop with his instep. Which like is, I mean, that's an insane level of skill to know that you can knock the ball that way and still get to it, knowing you trust your body and your athleticism to get to the ball when it could go wrong if your touch isn't right. And yeah, he skins that one defender, and God rest his soul. And this is a game too. I mean, we talked about maybe Mars having an absolute masterclass. I think this is Ricardo Zacarias's best game ever in a Locomotive shirt. And he's had a respectable season, to be fair to Ricky. 5 assists, 1 goal in 22 matches. I mean, as kind of a rotation player, that's absolutely not bad at all.
And he's filled in like all over the pitch.
Everywhere. Yeah. I mean, right back, right wing, maybe even a little bit of central midfield. Yeah, he's been a trooper for the team, and never looks, his body language is never one of like someone downing tools or not happy with their role. Like, he looks like he's just absolutely ecstatic to play for the badge and for the fans. So I can definitely respect that about Ricardo. But yeah, just absolutely sensational, and he does get into the team of the week for his exploits up in Colorado Springs.
A really good composed finish from Dylan Maris as well, and I think that is because at the end of that move, you're looking for, okay, who's about to finish this off? Like, is Ricky going to try to shoot or anything like that? And he just squares it. Dylan runs onto it and just slots it. Like, there was never really any doubt that he was going to put that away. And I think it's the sort of thing that we actually saw like early in this season when Dylan was scoring goals for fun in this team, where it was very simple. Like, a lot of his finishes were very simple, kind of rolled home. And so it was nice to see him make that late run and end up with a simple finish again. Just because we've made goal scoring look like a hell of a task over the last like 5 weeks or so. So to have
Absolutely.
some easy ones in this one. But Dylan and Ricardo popped up again on the fourth goal because Dylan picks the ball up. He was all over the place, but he picks the ball up deep on the left-hand side, like inside his own half on the left-hand side of the field, and plays a ball just into space for Ricardo Zacharias, but it is in that perfect pocket between the back line and the goalkeeper, where the goalkeeper isn't confident enough to come to the edge of his area to claim it. The back line isn't running with Zacharias enough to get there ahead of him. And then Ricky plays a ridiculous ball in, like, because he hits it first time on the half volley. And then Lucho absolutely slams it into the top corner from about 8 yards out. And the sort of goal, again, where it's like, where's this been the last month? Like, what? But it is, and it all seems so simple, but it really is just that quality cross-field, like, switch in behind from Dylan, like a truly crazy 70-yard through ball, basically.
Yeah.
In behind a fantastic first-time volleyed cross, and then a first-time finish from Lucho on the volley as well.
It's not exactly the same finish, but I think the level of technical quality and the build-up that led up to it reminded me of Brentford's goal, Ivan Toney's goal against Manchester United this past weekend. Sorry to any Red Devils fans that are listening to this, but no, it was Mbomo.
But
Ivan
Tony's
Toney,
pass.
Yeah, his half volley cross. It's absolutely insane, like kind of the similar type thing. And then the thing that I love about this finish from Lucho is, one, it's a striker's finish. I mean, he's getting there on the volley, just slamming it home, using the pace on the ball. But he's also celebrating pretty much as soon as his boot touches it. So he just knew that was going in, and that he was feeling himself. Because if you look back, he's already got his hand to his ear pretty much as soon as the goal crosses the line, goading the Switchbacks fans. And we might get onto that in a bit here. But just so much quality on display in such a short time. And to respond in the way that we did in style and to get something out of it is worth applauding, I think.
It looked from there, Locomotive applied, I would say, quite a bit of like polish to the end of this game and the way that they were seeing things out, and it all ends up getting undone, unfortunately, in the 94th minute. Although we may discuss a little bit about the amount of time. Hard to explain the full situation because a lot happens in this final sequence. The key is Andre Egaluz is penalized for a nothing challenge. Like, he wins a header in the air without really putting his hands on the Switchbacks player or anything like that. He's leapt and won the ball already before making contact with the Switchbacks player and is whistled for a foul, which is just nonsense. Like, again, a lot of what we talk a lot about refereeing decisions, and we talk about a lot of subjective stuff. There are 3 like objectively bad refereeing decisions that lead to this equalizer and then kind of like the aftermath. So,
well, and that's not a foul. It's a contact sport.
Yeah. It just isn't a foul because he's won the ball before he made contact with the player, like well before the player even challenged him for the ball. He's already won the header.
Right.
Challenge over. Like, whatever happens after that, unless Andre, punches him or something, or headbutts him, like, there is nothing in it. So they're whistled for the foul right outside of the area. The resulting free kick, Andre again involved because he's struck in the head by the resulting shot. And he remained down with a head injury. Referee doesn't stop the game, which, again, objectively, the referee, by the laws of the game, like as they exist now, because of concussion protocols, because of the like player safety, you have to stop the game for head injury. That's just the rules. And and there's no like, oh, was he? You don't make a determination about whether a player is truly suffering from a head injury. Like, he's been struck in the head by the ball, traveling at pace. You're not a doctor.
Right.
You stop the game.
Right.
Like, that's the. So anyways, cutting through that. And then the ball's put back into the area, in the exact sort of area that Under would have been defending in central defense. Yuma is trying to mark multiple people. It's headed home. And the Colorado Springs players all run over to their coach, who had already been sent off. And he returns to the field of play to celebrate with his players the equalizer, which, again, whatever. And then amidst all that, the referee then blows the final whistle at 95 minutes, having added a minimum of 5 on. The goal was scored at 93-12. The celebrations lasted till 95-35, and the referee blew the whistle as soon as the kickoff was taken, which means 2 minutes of added time just evaporated. So anyways, that final sequence is why, despite us watching 10 of the worst minutes of Locomotive football that we've ever witnessed, and absolutely feeling at halftime like we deserved nothing from this game, we all walked away defending the performance and feeling aggrieved by it at the end.
Just USL things, right? Yeah, that's incredible. The span of emotions that we went through in this game. Because, you know, it's just so infuriating when a victory is, I mean, it was on the tip of our tongues. Like, it was so close. And we were managing the game very well, I thought, you know, and that foul should never happen. I mean, this is one of those things where if we actually did, like, concede a foul in that area, I'd be furious and be like, yeah, of course we're going to concede from something like that at that time, because that's just, like, a dog shit thing to do. The foul itself is not a foul, and then there's just more mistakes after that. It's absolutely infuriating. Dare I say we were robbed. It's Andrew Aguiluz is crumpled on the floor. He's not a player that just does these things, right? Like, I could see an opponent, a fan of an opponent's team, kind of side eye something like that if it was Yuma, for example.
Sure.
Which, whatever, you know, like that's a thing.
I can only hope that one day San Antonio are denied an equalizing goal due to a fake Yuma head injury. That's really the dream.
Your only dream. Yeah, no, I mean, but you know what I'm saying? Like, Aguiluz is very much like a business-like player. Like, he gets absolutely smacked in the head with the ball. And like you said, we're not legislating about whether there's been a head injury. We're legislating about whether someone's been struck in the head. Whether they've actually been injured or not, like you said, you're not a doctor. Like, you just need to blow the fucking whistle. Like, and so it's just an absolute disgrace all the way through. That entire sequence is absolutely infuriating. And I feel for the boys because they really worked hard, extremely hard, showed so much character, and respect for one another and respect for the badge by coming back in the way that they did, and to have it snatched from them like that. You know, to only be a draw is really disappointing. And I mean, this is just going to keep on happening so long as there are no repercussions for shocking decisions like this. And in a way I understand it, because it's like, I mean, I don't know, I don't have the stats on this, but it's like, are people really like lining up to be professional referees? I don't know. You know, that's a tough job. Like, you're getting abuse from people like all the time, and you're expected to make these correct decisions in real time and in a very fast game, but that is the job, so do it right, you know. So it's infuriating the way that it ended. I would have been like, you know what, fair play if we actually did concede a foul in that area and then failed to defend it, but I mean, none of that should have ever happened. And we see this all the way up to the highest levels of the game. I mean, for anyone who watched Chelsea versus Tottenham Hotspur this weekend, like, if you know, you know. But
yep.
It's disappointing, but you know, then I try to look at it from the perspective of like, well, it could have been absolutely so much worse if we never came back at all.
Yeah, no, and that's the point ends up being, there's certain points in the game or certain times in the game where you're thinking, at 3-0 down, I would have absolutely bit your hand off for a point. At 4-3 up, and they're like, if you offered me a draw, I'd say, no, let's see if we can make it 5-4. But I think as we mentioned, it is extremely frustrating. I think what is tough about this is there are very valid concerns and very valid criticisms of the team's performance, the way they were set up, the way that that are all sort of undermined because the refereeing was so shocking. It wasn't a penalty. If it was, hey, 50-50 sort of penalty decision late and he decides to give it and it's yep, seen him given sort of thing, that's one thing. This is 3 or 4 shocking, objectively wrong decisions in a row in one sequence that hands the other team a goal that just wouldn't have happened. That goal just doesn't occur in multiple. If he makes one right decision in that sequence, it just doesn't occur, which leaves us kind of undermined in a way because it's we have these valid criticisms, but at the end of the day, the team should have won. If the rules were enforced correctly, the team would have won the game.
Right. And it's man, I was going to get on here and roast the team, but now
exactly.
I have to roast the referees as per. No, absolutely understand what you're saying there. It's just so tired of it. We can do bad all by ourselves. If we want to lose, we will.
Right.
We don't need your help.
Yeah, we don't need any help dropping points.
Yeah. Stop.
I think it's especially the whole under head injury thing is is even more disappointing in the context of the fact that this year USL has actually the concussion subs are a thing. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to implement a rule or a pilot program such as concussion substitutions, how on earth are you not preparing the referees to allow your concussion protocol to work?
Sure. Yeah.
If you don't create the space, then you end up with who was the Germany defender who's running around blacked out against Algeria for whatever at the World Cup, after suffering that head injury, he's or was it the semifinal, whenever it was in the 2014 World Cup where I can't remember who it was. But he talks about the fact that basically he was running around the pitch and woke up playing in the game because he had suffered a head injury.
Was it Kramer?
Yeah, Christoph Kramer, I believe.
Kramer, yeah.
He basically was playing totally concussed and so that's the sort of shit that they're trying to avoid.
Horrible.
Okay, that's awesome if you take a good stand about that. You have to actually do it. You can't just say, hey, we're incorporating concussion protocols, and then dude gets whacked in the head with the ball from 10 yards, and it was a shot on goal. It wasn't a cross. It wasn't a floated ball. He is driving this ball to try to score, strikes a player in the head, and nothing doing. So,
right.
The full-time whistle goes, and due to this sequence of events, which we have described as objectively incorrect from the referee, there's really no arguing any of the points. And I get that Colorado Springs fans would say, I'm sure hey, the referees are fallible, they make mistakes, it happens to every team. Sure, mistakes on subjective things, we can argue till the cows come home. Mistakes on these objective points, it's just not an argument. Whether or not he is human and can make mistakes, he shouldn't make that sequence of mistakes. It's just bad. So, understandably, especially given the fact that Locomotive are denied any sort of reprisal, basically, to try to go score the fifth, which, wasn't out of the question. They scored 4 unanswered goals in this game. Denied that opportunity because of the incorrect keeping of stoppage time that the referee added on. There is a strong reaction from Locomotive's players and bench to the blowing of the final whistle, including, I mean, I think most notably in that moment, Richie Ryan sprints straight to the referee, as does John Hutchinson from the sideline. And that is obviously a different level than what we're typically. Now, we've seen managers upset with referees at full time. It happens all the time. Yeah, we've seen sideline antics in the top leagues in the world, because, look me in the eyes when you shake my hand. But this instance and this level of anger at the final whistle was new, I think, to Locomotive, and probably not something that we've seen from really any situation. So talk us through, I guess, how do you feel about the team reacting so visibly to the referee like that? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about Yuma playing Peacemaker and actually getting a shout out from multiple people online for being so level-headed.
Well, no, I mean, that was what I was going to say is shit has gone completely south when Yuma Monsalves Jr. is the one playing Peacemaker and holding folks back from one another. What is happening? I mean, first of all, the game is played by human beings. It's coached by human beings, and sometimes human beings get really pissed off. Now, is that acceptable? Is that something that we want to see week in, week out? For entertainment purposes, absolutely yes. But if I'm being fair and analyzing the game, no, I mean, it reminded me of a joke that they were talking about over the weekend with the Conte Tuchel handshake dilemma, and they were like, "Oh, you don't want to see that," and it's every fan in the world's like, "Actually, I absolutely do."
I watch for shit like this. That's why.
Yeah, so in that sense, it's yeah, this is prime television. But
I'm sorry for that, but this is fantastic. What is it? I'm sorry about that, but this is whatever, fantastic entertainment, or
yeah.
What's the meme? I don't know.
It'll come to you.
I'm fucking the meme up, but
no, but I mean, yeah, it's one of those things that's yeah, when Yuma's playing Peacemaker, you have fully gone off the rails. Train pun. I'm sorry, but they have every right to feel aggrieved. There were so many things. It mirrored almost our plethora of mistakes. The referee was bet I can do that too, and made a plethora of mistakes in a crucial moment where we could have sealed a victory on the road when we're down hella bad in the table. So yeah, the aftercurriculars are really interesting, and I guess there was more to it than we even thought, or that met the eye on TV, I guess. So
I remember the meme now. I feel bad for our team, but this is tremendous content.
There you go, tremendous content.
With the post-game activities, it was at HJ the Third on Twitter, just asked thoughts. And I appreciate, first of all, shout out HJ for the use of thoughts. Really do appreciate that. Thoughts on the post-game activities, as well as the complaints from the home team's SG about Hutch. We got a little bit of insight, I guess, into what happened. There was sort of a incident, I guess, for lack of a better term, between some Colorado Springs supporters and John Hutchinson, right before halftime, where he used some colorful language as they, they were shouting some things at him. He shouted back. I guess, my whole thing is, people swear all the time. You can lip read on Premier League games, people are telling the referee to fuck off, go fuck yourself. Literally anytime you see this hand gesture in England, they are saying fuck off. They're saying they are. So I guess there is, and I'm not trying to attack the Colorado Springs fans or anything like that, but the amount of hand wringing in American sports about cursing is just like so odd to me, because I'm like, you're at a professional sporting event. We know that athletes like curse. That's like part of, I don't know. It's like part of culture. Like they don't like censor themselves, I guess, like on the field. And I'm not saying that they should say anything like truly offensive or truly like hateful or anything like that. But if they are swearing, that's like just not an issue to me. I don't know. What do you think about like a coach interacting with fans where fans are like maybe prodding a coach or a player and the player or coach says something back to them? Like, is this something that should be like policed, I guess? Or is it just like,
No, it's interesting because I think you brought up the Premier League, and I think that actually is a salient point and worth kind of exploring, because I think there is like a cultural divide on this issue. And what also came to my mind actually is because, I mean, of course, John Hutchinson is from the Commonwealth, as it were. He's from Australia. Like, he is, I mean, Australians probably hate me saying that, but, you know, English links there. And I thought of Niall Logue. You know, he has, I think it's maybe his default picture on Twitter of someone flipping him off. And he's like, I love the passion, mate. And like, Niall's from Ireland. So it's like, that to them is like vibes. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny. It's part of the game. Like, as long as it's not veering into like literal abuse, like personal attacks, like anything like, you know, any like bigotry or anything like that. I mean, there's levels, obviously. But and I'm gonna read what Trailheads SG tweeted, because I don't want to take what they're saying like and paraphrase it. But they said, you know, it's bad when EP Locomotive FC head coach tells off the Switchbacks FC fans. Our guys were saying, quote, be quiet. Not even a curse word when the coach didn't like a call. Hutchinson called them ugly motherfuckers. Which, I'm sorry, like, I'm already laughing before I even, like, okay, like, it's not nice to call someone an ugly motherfucker. No. Like, cool, I get that. But it's also, like, it's kind of funny. Like, I don't know.
Well, and it's not like you guys are, you know, he doesn't mean anything. Like, he doesn't know you. Like,
right. He probably didn't even see to it that you were actually ugly. Like, it just came out. Like, I don't know. Yeah. If it hurts someone's feelings in the crowd, like, obviously that's not cool. But what I would say is, like, I personally don't think it's that deep. Now, do I think, like, John Hutchinson should be engaging with the crowd in that way? Probably not. Like, probably not. That's not a good look, but whatever. It's also not worth making a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, let's be real. Like, Diego Simeone, like, turned towards the crowd and grabbed his nuts. Like, that, like, there is, like, there's all kinds of manager interactions, like, with crowds that, like, border on inappropriate or, like, or whatever. And I think the key to this incident is, like you said, culturally Australian, the word fuck is, like, just not a big deal. Motherfucker is also not a big deal. If he had said, like, and I'm not even comfortable saying it because of the cultural divide, but the C word.
Right, yeah. I mean,
which is also not a big deal in Australia, like, compared to what it is in America.
Here it's like, whoa, leave society. That was crazy.
Yeah. So, like, I think between that and the fact that, like, at the end of the day, like, it's a guy in the thick of, let's be real, like, Hutch's, whether or not he's genuinely under pressure, and this is not a conversation about Hutch's job, like, and whether or not he's going to be fired or something like that. It's just literally, he is in a highly competitive situation in his job, fighting for, like, Locomotive spot in the playoffs, fighting for... I would take that comment with the tiniest grain of salt that you can find, because it means absolutely nothing by it. Was it because he was probably annoyed with getting shouted at by randos behind the bench? Like, yeah, probably. But I just don't think there's enough in it to really, like, now, if he had said something like genuinely, like, racist, xenophobic, like, hateful, like, any of those things, 100%. hold people accountable for that shit. Like, there is no place for it. There is no room for it. Him saying something like that in an offhand comment because he's getting shouted at, it's just not that big of a deal to me. Like, I feel sorry for anyone who was like felt attacked by that or whatever. But at the same time, like, if you're going to shout at somebody, a professional athlete, shout at a professional manager, like, they are also human and they get to shout shit back at you. Like,
and that's the rub, isn't it? Is like, we always expect players and whoever to just like take the banter, but when it comes back, it's like, whoa. It's like, what? We're having a conversation. So
that's where I just say, like, hey, banter at your own risk. Like, if you want to shout at a guy, totally fine, but just don't be shocked when he says some shit back to you. Like, that's my whole, that's kind of my takeaway, is like, if you want to participate in banter, just be ready to be bantered with. Like, that's how it works. And obviously, if somebody steps way out of line, there's no room for that shit. But in this case, I don't think Hutch crosses a line, like, in his, now again, should he be like shouting shit back at the supporters? Probably not. Like, but this for me just doesn't bubble up like as significant or worth like starting any significant like thing over. And I would say, like, to address part of like what Trailhead said to us on Twitter, I would say if your experience with El Paso supporters was positive, that is really all you need to worry about. And I would say, like, if you're considering making trips to El Paso in the future, the benches on the far side, like, there's no stands near the benches, so you won't need to worry about Hutch. He'll be like way far away from anywhere in the stands, and all that. Anyways, I joke, but the reality is that, like, that won't have any impact on your experience, like, for traveling as a supporter to El Paso.
Yeah, and Eighth Notch are super, super welcoming too. Their pre-game parties are open to everyone, and actually, our stewards are very strict about cursing. Believe it or not, so that's why, I mean,
very strict.
Yeah, and I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but that's why it absolutely boils my piss when people say that we're chanting something homophobic, because it would not even be close to be allowed.
Yeah,
but I mean, do people do it? I'm sure, but like, it's totally,
it's police
legislated for. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So don't be afraid to come visit El Paso. You'll have a fun time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, you only need to reach out to Phoenix, San Antonio. Like, some of our most bitter rivals have had a hell of a time, I think, traveling to El Paso. So it's been fun. So well, I guess, Mikka, we can get on to some of the questions we got tonight. Seriously Loco listener questions. We can start with our friend Kevin at the KCQ94 on Twitter. He said, finally scoring and ending that scoreless streak. And even though we did end in a tie, will that be enough momentum to get back to winning ways? And what do you think is the biggest issue that needs to be addressed to maybe see the playoffs? So he mentioned the defense, lack of players, our attack, etc. So I guess kind of two parts to this question. Do you see this draw as positive momentum for this team? And secondly, what is the biggest kind of glaring thing that you think needs to be sorted out ahead of any sort of, I mean, because right now we are in a desperate fight for the playoffs. Like, truly every single point matters from here on out.
Absolutely. Yeah, Kevin brings up finally scoring, and it was something that I believe I mentioned last time we spoke on the podcast, Phil, is losing can become a habit just like winning can, and I think that extends to goals as well. So to explode for 4 goals like we did when really we were really down bad to pull this out, I think it is, or I hope anyway, that it bodes well for the rest of the season, because every game is absolutely crucial. Every game is a final, at this point. And the closer we get to the end, the less we're able to kind of, or the more we will have to rely on people around us, and the less we'll have to say about it. So that's why it's really important that this does become a habit again, and we trend upwards. The momentum, yeah, I mean, that's the thing about why this refereeing at the end is so infuriating, because I think the momentum could have been absolutely huge if we walk away with all 3 points. And maybe we harness the injustice and turn that into motivation. I mean, that could be a thing, and I think if there's anyone that can, foster a bit of a siege mentality, it might be John Hutchinson and his staff, to be fair. But yeah, I'm hoping it will be enough momentum to get back to winning ways. And I mean, there was never a question about whether there's talent in this squad, because there absolutely is. And it's just about having everyone have a good game. We can't have, Dylan and Ricky, have a masterclass every week. Like, everyone needs to be playing well together. Yeah. And that sounds really like simplistic, and yeah, but as for what I think is the biggest issue, he says maybe defense, lack of players, striking, or other. I mean, I think for me, it's like I said, one, everyone playing well at the same time, but two, another thing that I think I wanted to see in this one, I think we did see it in the second half, is just making the sprints that we used to make at the beginning of the season, right?
Yeah.
Like, watching Yuma wait for that ball come to him for the first goal, like, absolutely killed my soul. Like, we can't be doing that. We have to be intentional in everything that we do, on and off the ball. And so I just want to see more of that, more of wanting to get to the ball first and not being passive on the pitch. That's what I would say has been the biggest issue, is just kind of like not making that final run, or waiting for the ball to come to us, letting ourselves get pressed, and letting people hunt us in packs and isolate some of our slower, less athletic players, if you will. So yeah, that's it for me. I wouldn't necessarily say like defense or attack or anything like that, but just more of like our behavior on the pitch.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on a couple of those things, and I won't even, in terms of the momentum, I think you've captured that point like exactly how it is. The question of whether a draw kind of tips towards positive momentum or negative momentum, I think is really, I always think of, and again, I go back to Liverpool shit, but Pep Linders, the assistant at Liverpool, talks about like the 5 minutes after a game are more important than the 5 days before a game. So he talks about, like, in terms of preparation, like whatever was said in the 5 minutes in the locker room after this match will like drive all of the training sessions, all of the, like, that mentality and what was said in the locker room is ultimately going to tip this either into a positive draw or a negative one. Like, and that's where I think, like, we can't necessarily know. I mean, there's been clips and stuff from the locker room at Colorado Springs, but, you know, in terms of video and like what was said in the locker room post-match, but I think like whatever those players took away from that moment, like either to say, hey, this is a turning point for the rest of the season, or shit, like that we got robbed, whatever. Whether they turn that positive or negative really has already, I think it's almost already happened. And it should be showing in training as we speak, basically, like in the build up to San Diego. As far as the biggest issue, I think like you hit on an interesting point in terms of the sprints. And I think like you said, in the beginning of this match, there is a feel of a lack of intensity, like in many phases. And the switch that was flipped, however that switch got flipped, like we finally looked like the team that started this season in terms of the level of intensity. Did that team like necessarily rack up wins or whatever? Like not all the time, but there were so many games where we were the better side, looked the more intent, like played with like played with sometimes reckless abandon, but played with intensity. Like that was never a question. That hasn't been the case for a month. Like we haven't always looked the more intense. We haven't always looked the more up for it, like if that makes sense. And until the second half of this one, we looked second best like throughout. We looked ponderous, we looked plodding, whatever adjective you want to use. Like we just looked slow to everything, second to every challenge, like second to every loose ball. And in the second half, it was exactly the opposite. Like we were so intense, everybody was just clicking. And I think so that plus my thing is we finally saw the team, and I talked about this in the last episode, we saw the team try to play through the opposition, and it worked. Like we have the quality to play through the middle. The Dylan Maris like opener, it comes from a sequence of passing through the center of the field. Like it's not us trying to get down the wings. It's not us like, it's not anybody bombing on. It's not somebody like getting to the byline and floating across. And I would say like any of these goals come from like build up play,
right?
Rather than like we spray things out to the wings and just like hope that everything happens. Obviously, crosses are still a part of this, but it comes from like playing people in behind or playing people into space or playing through the middle and breaking lines, like those sorts of moves. And so I think that's what, if we continue to see the patterns that we saw in the second half, then yeah, I think we will have a quite successful run in, because we can beat any team if we play that way with that intensity. We just haven't done both basically all season. Yeah. Barring a handful of games. So I think we saw the glimpses here of what this team is capable of, and whether Hutch can get that out of them every single week for the run in will be the determining factor of whether we are making this late playoff push or not.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So our next question came from @AlexMedic17 on Instagram, who many of you will know better as the Banana Man, I believe. So he said, I really liked Solignac in midfield distributing the ball, which created goal opportunities for him. Do you think it's a fluke, or do you think we can see him as a fixture in midfield? So I know we kind of like hinted at this earlier in the episode, Mikka, but talk to me about Lucho, the midfielder.
Yeah, look, I don't love it. I can see why Banana Man and why maybe some others would like it, because at the end of the day, Lucho is a very technical player, and I think he could do a job there. But I think that's why he was there, was to, quote, do a job, not necessarily do his best job, which I think is as a center forward. I mean, I would look no further than the second goal to show, like, Lucho touching the ball in that area is more often than not, like, for me, not a great thing. He does cough the ball up and, cough possession up, and they go on to score. Now, coughing up possession is not always going to lead to a goal, but it just so happens that it did for Lucho in an unfamiliar position, away from home. And I think the manager was really trying to just like switch things up, and also he was kind of forced into it because some of our options, like you said at the top of the show, Phil, I mean, Edison Escoto, I don't think he necessarily warranted another start. And we were trying to switch it up. And so for that reason, like I wouldn't want to necessarily see it again, because I do think Lucho Solignac is best as a center forward. Now, is he... And the thing about it is, Lucho does play make from that center forward position. So you don't necessarily need him in midfield to do that, because he will drop off, sometimes too much, because he's so interested in getting on the ball, right? But for him to actually start there, like I don't really like that balance or lack thereof with the other midfielders. And to me, he's not a midfielder. Like, he's at best like as deep as you want to go for a starting position, maybe like a second striker, if that. Mm-hmm. But I like him leading the line personally. Yeah, and I think you see why. You kind of see why in both goals. Like, he ends up in good positions, like in and around the 6-yard box, and that's where he's like making the difference. That's not the only place that he makes a difference, as you said. Like, he does like to drop deep. He drops off.
And I think like there's a lot of players who like in world football who exhibit those sort of qualities that you would never just put in midfield, and that's okay. Like, Roberto Firmino's a famous example. Harry Kane over the last like 2 years,
for sure,
playmaking striker, like 100%.
The best playmaking striker in the world for me. Yeah, and I hate like to say that. I'm an Arsenal fan.
But you wouldn't say, "Hey, Rodrigo Bentancur, like you're sitting this game because Harry's starting in midfield, like in the 8." Because it's just not the same. Like playmaking as a striker and playing as like an 8 or a 10, ostensible 10, however you want to like paint it, it's just not the same. The responsibilities are super different. Pressing is not the same as winning the ball back or blocking passing lanes, or like the jobs are just different. And it's okay that Lucho is not. He's. I think this is his second game that he started in this position in midfield this season, and I wasn't sold the first time it was announced. I was like, interesting. I wonder if this will work. And I don't think it did then, and I don't think it did this time. And that's okay. Like, again, not a criticism of Lucho. Not even, I think it's just a question of like, okay, we see these qualities from Lucho. Where are those best implemented? And I don't think the answer is ever going to be as part of the midfield. Like, I think the answer will always be either dropping in as, the whatever you want to call it, false 9, all that stuff. But he plays as a 9. Like he's a playmaking 9. That's really the best way, I guess, to describe it. And the proof's in the pudding, because he moves to striker and grabs 2 goals like that. We move him out of midfield with the Francois sub, and he's immediately involved. And he gets the assist, for Dylan's goal, which I'm not saying that, or Dylan's first goal, I should say, which Lucho doesn't do a ton to create that goal, but he is in the right position to receive the ball and lay it off to Dylan, which is kind of how Lucho is supposed to interact with the rest of the team, on the edge of the area, rather than where he is kind of vulnerable for their goal when they win it off him, which is he's closer to like the center circle. 2 very different positions to control the ball in. And I think we saw like the pros of Lucho having control of the ball on the edge of the area, and the con of Lucho having the ball closer to midfield.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry if you can hear my dogs like screaming bloody murder in the background. They only do this when we're recording the podcast, of course. But I mean, like, and there's nothing wrong with liking Solignac there, by the way. Like, this is just us.
Yep.
And our opinions, of course. And the other thing I will say for Lucho is that I think he does better when the ball is played in front of him rather than when he has to necessarily turn with it under pressure. Not that he can't turn with the ball, but I mean, when you face a side like Colorado where they are going to nip at your heels and be pressing in packs like that, like I just don't think that really highlights what he can do on the ball when he drops deep. And as we saw, like all his good moments came in the box. So yeah, that's just kind of my take on it. But I'm interested to see if there's anyone that kind of agrees with Banana Man here and thinks like maybe this could be a thing, because hey, who knows? Yeah.
No, it is interesting. And as we look for solutions, whether it's in the current injury crisis and with the signings that we've added, Jay Konecki on Twitter asks, what is with the club's obsession with foreign players? Rose has been okay for us, but could we really have not found a player of similar quality that was already playing in the States? It seems silly to sign midseason additions that take forever to get their visas, especially when we need reinforcements quickly. I'm sure Artem, he's talking about Artem Kalad, who's joined up with the team now, but obviously the signing was announced, I think, like a month ago.
Yeah, like mid-July, I think.
Yeah.
Early mid-July.
Yeah, so he said, I'm sure Artem has talent, but why sign someone we have to wait on when I'm sure there's talent available, foreign or American, that is already ready to go? By foreign, I mean players playing outside of the U.S. that don't have the paperwork ready to play here. So obviously Jake is not trying to take like a xenophobic approach here. He simply means why not sign players who are already based domestically, who don't have to jump through hoops to start playing for the team, especially midseason when a lot of these signings have felt, and I think we talked about this last episode with Artem signing, is like, it makes a lot of sense as long as he's around for a while, and as a short-term solution doesn't make as much sense. So, I mean, this is kind of the rub, right? Is like we've talked on the podcast, and I wrote a little article about like potential signings out there, and kind of with this big caveat of like, it will be way easier if we sign guys based in the States, because they'll be able to come in and kind of make an impact immediately.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I mean, this does predate John Hutchinson, to be fair, and I think that's why Jake says, what is the club's obsession with foreign players? He didn't say John Hutchinson. He didn't say, whatever. Because Mark Lowry was also keen on bringing guys from abroad. And, like, personally, as a fan, I like it because I like the diversity. I like the different kind of, like, footballing philosophies that all these players have come up through. We've got some really, really talented players in the lineup that have come from famed academies, and I think that's awesome. And I think that's a aspect of football where the United States lags behind. I mean, they're catching up, but I mean, the FC Dallases of the world and the Barca academies, the residency academies and things like that. But like, as for like actual like really built out academies, you'll find those elsewhere, right? So in that way, I do like it, but this is just a feeling that I have. It's not based on anything I've heard or anything like that. It's just an opinion I have. But I mean, there was a piece that Joe from The Striker put out where he interviewed Hutch, and Hutch was talking about his kind of like disdain for USL pitches, right? And he said that as well in like press conferences and things. He's also commented on kind of like his disdain for long ball or perceived long ball tactics in USL. And so when I think of his recruitment from abroad in the context of some of the things that he has said, it does lead me to think like, okay, maybe there is like a general hesitance, or like maybe like a distrust might be too strong a word, but like just like a hesitance to look internally, and by internally I mean in North America, for talent and things like that. I think he is trying to bring a European style game to Locomotive, if you will. And so with that comes players from Europe and elsewhere. So I think that's kind of where it comes from, but I do share the frustration, and like, it's not very practical unless you're rebuilding, right? But we were told that that's not really the case, but yeah, seems like it to me.
Yeah, no, and I think you only need, we talked a little bit about this. I'm maybe having deja vu, but I think you only need look so far as the players available that have gone elsewhere in the league that I think could have made sort of an immediate impact. Akeem Ward, it like pops straight to mind, just in terms of like a player that I sort of talked about as like being a potential target. Really the pair of Akeem Ward and Memo Diaz, who have just both like somehow fallen out of favor at Oakland, and obviously the Memo Diaz connection feels like it would have been an easy sort of transaction to get somebody who we know can provide a lot of value at right back, and play in a way, I mean, because Memo's an attacker at heart, so like we know that he would play that kind of like swashbuckling style that John wants the fullbacks to play, and it wasn't forthcoming. Like, we went way further afield to find a right back replacement, even with season-ending injuries to Chapa, Siobhan John Brown, Harry Brockbank obviously leaving. Like, we were like, yep, we are good with Matt Boehner, and then we will bring in like Miles Lyons as like an academy, from an academy, and we will bring in Artem Kolod and like take kind of a punt on a guy coming from a foreign academy. Like we were clearly okay with not signing. Like we didn't go out of our way to find like if there was a deal out there for a USL right back or a ready-made USL right back. So I think the club's been, for better or worse, they've basically like set out that like these are the types of players that we're going to target. And yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it's an element of like, I think in some cases, like you said, I love the idea that we go out and we kind of like go off the beaten path and we try to find value like elsewhere, and particularly like I think we found a couple of really good players who weren't necessarily valued in USL. And on the like at the same time, like I definitely get the very valid question marks around like, hey, if we're looking for ready-made solutions, why aren't we kind of like looking at the obvious, and why are we spending so much time kind of looking for something when there's a maybe more obvious solution kind of staring us in the face? And that's I think that's kind of been the case since Locomotive was founded in terms of the players that we've kind of like ended up going and getting. Like we haven't always looked at those sort of like proven talents at this level, and we've always kind of looked for differentiation, I guess, like
right,
and looking for folks elsewhere. So yeah, it does kind of fit with the club. And Jake, I know that's probably not a super satisfying answer, because it seems like that's just how we're going to do business. Like it seems like that's how we kind of roll. The one player that was like reportedly available, I guess, like around the Richie Ryan thing was Noah Powder, and he ended up moving to Tulsa, I believe. And he was one where I'm like, man, in terms of fullbacks, like if he's available, like you kind of just go get him, I think. Like, and that's where the lack of movement at fullback was kind of frustrating, particularly because it seemed like there was decent like value in the market. But anyways,
for sure. And I mean, now I'm thinking about it, and I wonder like how tough or not it is to recruit internally, because it does seem like in our league there is like a hierarchy of like preferred destinations, and we may not be one of those just yet. I think if a Phoenix calls you, or like a Tampa or a Louisville or someone like that, like you might go to that club before you come to El Paso Locomotive. And I think people are seeing El Paso Locomotive as a project. Well, I'm sure, the coaching staff would disagree with us on that, but if you are wanting to win now, maybe you're not so interested in joining at this time, whereas players from abroad, it might actually be easier to convince them. I don't know. I'm kind of just spinning my wheels on this one at this point, but
yeah,
I think it's a combination of all of those things, to be fair.
I agree. Yeah, no, it is an interesting question. And I think like ultimately we end up with a not so great answer, because we're not in the decision loop of the decision makers at Locomotive who are actually going out and interacting with play. We did get a little bit of maybe this is a more useful thing. We got a little bit of an insight into John Hutchinson and his approach to like player signing recently, and I want to make sure that we give credit where it's due, because there's John Hutchinson fans, I should say, or people who have followed his managerial or coaching career from Australia, who wrote a bit of an article a little bit ago interviewing John for their website, and I want to make sure that
I think it was it Sasha Pisani?
It was Sasha Pisani, who's also like covered Ange Postecoglou, and so like he's kind of in this like Ange hive, I guess. But so they posted they posted an article interviewing John, and obviously there was a lot of stuff that we had we had heard, like either from talking to John himself or from his just interactions with the media this season. But the last part of the article talked about his role as technical director, and it became pretty clear that John, not a huge fan of the technical director side of the job, and actually said at one point in the article, like, I wish someone else could do it, because dealing with agents and all this stuff, like, it just isn't his cup of tea. And that was a little bit of an interesting insight, because I don't think that was necessarily the case with Mark. Mm-hmm. He seemed to kind of like, whether or not it was always this way, he always seemed to kind of enjoy being like having that little extra like modicum of control.
Yeah.
And John definitely was giving like Tuchel vibes of like, let me coach the team and you just do the shit. Like I don't want to deal with all this other stuff. Like, I would just rather like manage the team.
Right. Well, and to be fair to him, like, that is definitely like the continental model now, is like there is a director of football or a sporting director or a technical director or whatever you want to call it, and the manager. And those things used to all be, one and the same. Think Arsene Wenger and things like that. But now that job is differentiated, because they are, I would say they're fairly different jobs, coaching what's going on the pitch, and then dealing with agents, contracts, what have you, and signing players. So yeah, that was really interesting insight from Sasha's piece. And yeah, maybe we'll link it if I can go back and find it again. I'll like RT it or something. But that's fascinating, and it makes me wonder like if there's ever going to be like a divorce of those roles, because I think that would be very interesting to see if we were ever to bring someone in who is just the technical director. Because yeah, I just think that would be fascinating, because it's kind of what we're used to.
Right.
Technical directors, everyone knows who's the technical director of their club over in Europe for the most part. Like Arsenal's is Edu, like Liverpool's is Julian Ward, like it's
Portuguese king. We stand a Portuguese king. You might be thinking Julian Ward doesn't sound Portuguese, but he loves a Portuguese player. So
there you go. Yeah, good question, though,
yeah.
Jake.
No, really great, and I think a good discussion, because it's like it's not set in stone. Like, it doesn't have to be manager and technical director. That's not something that must, as we've said, like, it's not something that must stand. So yeah, interesting kind of approach, and I guess we'll see how they're. I'm most interested to see how they approach this offseason, because I think there's a lot of change inbound. We have had this core of Lowry players. I think that's going to change pretty significantly, just based on some things that we've heard, and obviously with the Richie situation. I think we're in for a pretty big shakeup this summer, which is maybe tough for fans to hear, given the fact that we were like kind of in for a shakeup this year also. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how the front office handles this offseason, and certainly recruitment going forward, to reload and come back for next season. But the Seriously Loco match preview. As we head into a game against San Diego Loyal, it's worth acknowledging that we are really in the home stretch now, of this USL season. 8 games to go for Locomotive, and this one coming against San Diego Loyal, as we said, on Saturday at home. San Diego in really good form, minus they suffer a loss in their most recent game to Birmingham, but including that match, they have won 8 of their last 10. So pretty much complete opposite to Locomotive's form in terms of just racking up points here, and they have climbed up to second in the West, just behind San Antonio FC. So all of that being said, San Diego coming to El Paso, what are you expecting from the visitors, I guess, as Locomotive tried to turn their momentum from this 4-4 into something positive?
It's going to be a big test, I think. I mean, San Diego Loyal have so many different players that can contribute. I mean, Kyle Vassell, top scorer with 11 goals, also has 2 assists to his name. Mushabani has been incredible this season as well. I mean, Charlie Adams, Nick Moon, like it's a really good side, a really good footballing side. Obviously coached by Landon Donovan. I mean, when you're coached by a legend like that, like, I mean, that doesn't necessarily make a good coach, right? If you were an excellent player, but it looks like he's doing a good job, and I think that he's also built a really competent coaching staff as well, to be fair. So yeah, I mean, things are going well in Southern California. Coque Vegas is a keeper that I think is well worked, I would say, because I think of all the teams currently in the playoff positions in the Western Conference. San Diego Loyal concede the second most goals. So Coque Vegas, like, he was a big signing in the offseason, and he's definitely earning his keep there. So I think he's an impressive player, but I think at the same time, Loyal can be gotten at, right? Because while they do score a lot of goals, they do concede quite a few as well. And, you know, that's despite Coque Vegas' best efforts. So, because he's been really quite good. So yeah, I mean, it's a good side for sure, and it'll be interesting to host them. Have they ever come to the Swap?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So like Landon Donovan rocking up to Southwest University Park is kind of blowing my mind a little bit. Like it's weird, but you know, at the end of the day, though, it's not about him. It's about the players on the field, and we'll just have to see if we can make yet another U.S. men's national team manager, or, you know, legend turned manager, storm off in anger. I would welcome it.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the defensive record, and I think it is like probably it is the Achilles heel of Loyal. They've only kept 6 clean sheets this season, which not what you'd expect, I guess, of like that top tier of team in the West. I think, you know, thinking about like the amount of clean sheets that Locomotive have kept, you know, over over the years, it's you know, most seasons double digits, like quite comfortably. So to only have 6 headed into the last 6 games, like, it is pretty that is pretty shocking, I guess, from a team that has performed so well, but they have done it off the back of just good and timely goal scoring. A lot of these, like, with the exception, I mean, they have a couple of pretty impressive victories, but they have this knack about them, I guess, of getting the goals when they need it. Like the 2-1 against RGV stands out, the 3-2 against Orange County. Like those sorts of games where they're winning these close games, you know, another 3-2 away at Switchbacks. Those sorts of like timely goal scoring from the likes of like Kyle Vassell, who has been really their go-to, their danger man this season, has been the difference maker. The one thing that I will point out going into a game at the Swap is that San Diego, their home record, almost, you know, infallible. Like they've won 10 out of 13 at home. They only have 5 wins on the road.
Oh, brutal. Yeah.
It has been away from Torero. They have struggled more so. Now, they are still better than you know, 500, I guess, on the road in the sense that they've only lost 3 games. But yeah, 3 losses, 4 draws on the road to 5 wins. So I guess the hope here is that Locomotive can seize on what is a more vulnerable team away from San Diego as they travel to El Paso.
Well, man, let's hope, because I think this could be one of those hashtag statement victories if we're able to pull it off, because Loyal have been flying high. And I mean, there's no shame in catching an L against Birmingham, to be fair.
Yeah.
So I think that they can easily squirrel that one away and chalk that up to just a tough fixture against an Eastern Conference opponent. But yeah, I think it would be really huge to get something out of this.
And speaking of, we did get a couple of questions about the playoff picture, and I don't know that it's even, it just hasn't clarified enough because of the amount of games in hand that the likes of like Sac Republic and everyone seemingly has around us. But what I will say in terms of the playoff picture is Locomotive can basically say that every point available is needed. And I don't mean that in a sense that like every single game, I don't mean like if we don't win against San Diego, we're not going to the playoffs. But what I do mean is that we are taking a chance every time we don't win here, like from here on out, because all it takes is a team like LA Galaxy 2 or Oakland or Phoenix to go on a bit of a run, and suddenly we'll find ourselves on the outside looking in. The good news in the short term, and this is happening as we speak here on Wednesday night, the 17th at 9:07 Mountain Time. New Mexico United has lost 2-0 to Memphis, 9:01.
Shout out Niall Logue.
He was out for this match, unfortunately.
He's been struggling with some injuries, yeah.
Yeah. But New Mexico does lose 2-0. And it's only halftime, so still a ways to go in this one. But Vegas is trailing Orange County 1-0 as we speak, both of which would be big results for Locomotive in the playoff picture, because New Mexico, despite having a much better season, ostensibly than Locomotive, are with one game in hand. New Mexico is only 5 points ahead, which with the run that New Mexico is on is not insurmountable, I would say, because they have regressed like pretty significantly here in the second half of the season. And Orange County's recent resurgence has actually been helping Locomotive out quite a bit with teams around them. So anyways, if they can pull off the win against Vegas, it just will create take a little bit of pressure off Locomotive maybe going into this one. But for Locomotive, I guess we've talked about what we want to see from them. So how do they best, I guess, get at Loyal and what we want the intensity. We've talked about that. We want them to try to play through the team, try to like play their game, I guess, essentially. How does, whether it's through personnel or the shape or the type of players that Hutch starts in this one, how does he achieve like that intensity that you would want to see coming out of the blocks against this Loyal team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost getting to the point of the season where it's like not even necessarily about tactics anymore, but about just responding to everything that goes wrong at this point. And I think what's really going to be crucial is to score first, because when we concede first, it is just brutal watching them try to get back into the game. And I know we saw a very spirited response in Colorado, but that takes a lot of emotional and physical energy out of a team to like try and replicate that week in, week out. So why don't we score first and build from there? I think it's much easier to build from a place of positivity, right, than to have to get yourself up for a real battle when you've gone down by as many goals as we did in Colorado. And I'm hoping that, obviously, that's not the case when San Diego comes to town, but I'd really like to see us score first and then build on that. And I think with Lucho Solignac having found his shooting boots, that's more likely than it has been at any point in the past month and change. So that's what I'm looking for. I guess tactically I'm looking for more of a traditional, like, strong 11. Like, I think John Hutchinson has tried to switch it up a bit recently to try and get us out of this rut, and that's fine. I totally understand that, but I mean, the guys that have been here with us from virtually the start are the ones that have really responded, and led the team to an incredible, almost all the way comeback in Colorado, and I think they should be rewarded for that with starts, and let some of the players that have been kind of more favored recently sit this one out.
Yeah,
to start.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think we've actually seen this season, and I mean, this could be whatever, totally anecdotal, and if the data doesn't support it, or I'm just like misremembering, you are free to call me out. I feel like we've had a handful of games where a player has kind of like had a really solid game and immediately been benched. And I don't mean like benched in a negative way, but been like they've played well and then not started, and whether it's for legs or whatever. And I think like at this point of the season, you just can't really afford to do that. Like you have to play the hot hand. And there are players on Locomotive that, if you said in a vacuum to me, who are you going to start in attack? There are players that I would pick ahead of Ricardo Zacharias, and that's no disrespect to him. Like there are players in a vacuum that I would pick ahead of him just based on like pedigree and like, what we've seen so far. Based on how he played in Colorado, Ricardo Zacharias needs to start and needs to get the two hands on the shoulder of like, you like whatever was going on in that second half to like allow you to play with that level of confidence and that level of like just not being like so caught up maybe in like, I don't know, he just was so direct, so decisive.
Are you saying that we shouldn't be so fucking extra as Christian Canales would put it?
Just be direct, be decisive, like, and start those players like who had that, you try to like capture what happened. And obviously, this is, if it were easy, like everybody would do it and you would just bottle up whatever sort of magic led to that, to the four unanswered goals. But the reality is that like, I don't think we're in a position where we should be saying, oh, this was created by a specific tactical situation, or this was created by a specific game state, or, oh, Colorado dropped off because like they took this 3-goal lead. It's like, no, like we need to look at 0-0. How can we recreate this? And I think the start, as you said, is just kind of throwing a little bit of the, like, I don't want to say common sense, because a lot of it is common sense, but throwing some of the maybe the advanced things out the window and saying like, hey, Ricky really got out their fullback. Let's let him go out there from like kickoff and just run at that guy for 90 minutes, like, or 60 minutes or however long he's out there. But like, let's just like let what happened there. Let's try to make it happen again. And kind of play on the emotion a little bit of like getting that same sort of response from kickoff. Like, because the way that we played in that second half and the way that this team is capable of playing, we can blow anybody away in any game. Like there isn't a team in USL that can stand up to what we did to Switchbacks. The problem with this season is we have rarely been that team.
Right.
So for whatever it takes to like be that team from kickoff the rest of the season, like that is what we should be focused on. And in the moment, I think it is, playing the hot hand rather than maybe focusing on players who have previously, I think, on paper would be ahead of some of the guys that you're going to start. I think right now it is a lot about playing on some of the emotion and just playing with a level of intensity. And let's be real, it is a ton of quality that is still in the side. So,
and to be fair, like if you were looking for responses from some of those older heads, I think you got them.
Yeah.
So, from the Marazes and the Ryans of the squad, but yeah.
Yeah. So Well, headed into this one, like we know who Loyal is going to look to carry them. I think being back in Southwest University Park does do us some favors, and hopefully the team is buoyed by returning home. But I guess what do you make of this one? What do you think that Locomotive can get a win against a Loyal team that maybe doesn't travel quite as well as they perform at home?
If we score first, yes, I think so. I think going down is really what's so like psychologically harmful to us, not to mention like harmful to the actual score and our table position. So how we start, I think, is going to be crucial. Because yeah, we just can't let it get away from us like we did. It's too much emotional and physical work to try and come back from an unfavorable position. So yeah, if we score first, for sure. And I mean, generally, I know you're looking for a bit more of a solid answer from me. I think we can. Like I do. I mean, this San Diego Loyal side, they're good. They're good, but no one is like ridiculous. Like the Phoenix of 2 or 3 years ago. Like I don't feel that way about anyone in the Western Conference. I think everyone's just. I think everyone towards the top is good at kind of like what they do, but I don't think anyone is absolutely outstanding. And I really don't mean that as any form of disrespect to those teams. It's just like that's just how I feel. Like I really don't think anyone's like a Phoenix of what we've seen in the past or anything like that. So anyone can be gotten at, I think, in the Western Conference, and it's time that we show folks what we can do on a more consistent basis.
Yeah. And I would absolutely love it. It was funny because early in the season, we scored early and threw those leads away. Now it's we always go behind. So I would love to see us take another crack at scoring first, as you said. That would be fun. And yeah, well, I guess we'll see what happens. It is. Yeah, it's by no means a foregone conclusion, and I think we inevitably, and I think the team will be thinking of them. We're not in the locker room to hear what's said, but I think the team will be thinking of these games as must win. Whether or not they mathematically end up being must win to make the playoffs is maybe another story, because there's other like aspects of this at play, and we're going to be reliant on other teams and help around us and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, like I think the team just has to view these remaining games as, cup finals or must win, however you want to think about it. But there is no more room for, hey, we played well, but just like didn't get the rub of the green. It's like, we got to go out and assert ourselves, on these games. And if you walk away from it saying that, hey, like we outplayed them and maybe didn't get the bounces or get the luck, like that is one thing. But if you walk away from that game thinking, we could have done this, or we made this mistake or whatever, like there's just no room for that anymore. Yeah, the idea of watching a USL postseason without Locomotive in it is quite revolting to me. So I'd rather not do it.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. But I think the players, and like there are enough professionals in this dressing room that there will be a response in the remaining games. Whether or not that ends up, actually amounting to anything is a different story. But I think they've got the capability to make these last 8 games at least interesting.
Agreed. I mean, these are talented lads. Like, let's just get behind them and hope that we can lean on some of our history in these situations.
Yeah. Well, as I'm looking at the live table, Vegas equalized, so they climbed to actually level with us on points with a game in hand. So still, after whatever happens in this one, and it looks like Sac Republic also took the lead against Colorado, so Colorado's struggles continue so far. But anyways, the playoff picture will begin to crystallize, and we will absolutely be there for every bit of it in the run-in. Locomotive do take on Loyal at the swap, and I'm fairly certain, barring a true persistence of this illness, Mikka will be in attendance and enjoying the game from the press box. But yeah, we're looking forward to what should be a good clash. And as you said, Mikka, Landon Donovan's first trip to the swap, so it does feel a little bit significant, even if the club's tweets about it just reek of SEO. But
SEO.
But yeah, so we're really looking forward to what should be a great game, and hopefully Locomotive come out of the block strong against a good Loyal side and give a good account of themselves. We'll be following along, and we'll be back, I'm sure, to recap all of the action from that one in a subsequent episode. And we'll be, as I said, following along with Locomotive's run in here, and hopefully carrying this on into at least a couple of playoff games. But a lot of work to be done before then. If you need a quick reminder, you can find us on any of the major podcast platforms, as well as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and you can find us on Patreon. We should have kits before long. We're just a couple of weeks away, I think, from having kits in hand from Icarus, and yeah, hopefully everyone is still hanging in there after what was a crazy shocking result in Colorado, and can't wait to see Eighth Notch and company pack the house against San Diego and bring a great atmosphere to what is hopefully the start of a great Locomotive winning streak. And until we get to talk about that next time, then I hope you'll stay Loco.
Peace.